While much of the world remained distracted by conflicts of their own making, something far more symbolic was unfolding quietly in West Africa, an event that many dismissed as routine, but would ripple far beyond the region. On June 26, 2025, within the presidential halls of Ouagadougou, a young revolutionary stood tall: Captain Ibrahim Traoré. He wasn't just welcoming foreign dignitaries, this was something far deeper. 8 ambassadors, each from a strategically significant nation, arrived not merely with formalities, but with intent. What transpired wasn't just diplomacy, it was the redrawing of power lines in Africa and beyond. In a space once marked by colonial whispers and puppet regimes, a new story was being written, one where influence no longer flowed from Paris or Washington, but from emerging powers of the global South. The countries that presented their letters: India, Turkey, Cuba, Gabon, Equatorial Guinea, Sierra Leone, Luxembourg, and Bangladesh weren't random allies. Their presence was deliberate. Each represented a shift in how Burkina Faso, and perhaps the region, intends to engage with the world as equals, not subjects. To understand why this moment caused concern among global observers, one must look beneath the surface. For years, a complex system of neo-colonial control operated in the shadows, particularly across French-speaking African nations. Known informally as Francafrique, it ensured French economic, political, and military dominance long after official independence. Central to this control was the CFA franca currency imposed on 14 African nations, requiring them to deposit half of their foreign reserves into French coffers. While it was sold as a stabilizing mechanism, many African leaders saw it as a financial leash designed to suppress true sovereignty. French military involvement added another layer. Operations under the guise of anti-terror missions filled the Sahel region with foreign troops. Yet violence only worsened. Cities like Bamako, Niamey, and Ouagadougou became symbols of frustration and unrest. People began questioning whether these interventions were about security or about safeguarding French interests in gold, uranium, and geopolitical influence. Amid this disillusionment, memories of past leaders resurfaced, none more prominent than Captain Thomas Sankara. In the 1980s, Sankara inspired a generation with bold policies on self-reliance, women's rights, and environmental reform. His leadership challenged dependency and colonial frameworks. But in 1987, his life was cut short under suspicious circumstances, and his dream was buried, though never forgotten. For years, his ideas simmered beneath the surface, waiting for someone to revive them. Captain Ibrahim Traoré emerged from this very legacy. Born in 1988, a year after Sankara's assassination, Traoré wasn't a politician molded by elite institutions. He was a soldier forged in the chaos of counterterrorism operations. He witnessed firsthand how local soldiers were ill-equipped and underserved, while foreign interests dominated national priorities. In September 2022, he led a coup that many saw not as a power grab, but as a rejection of a failed system. The regime he overthrew was viewed as another extension of foreign influence, this time cloaked in military fatigues. From the beginning, Traoré's message stood apart. He didn't talk about transitional promises or empty reforms. He spoke of sovereignty, dignity, and a united Africa. He echoed Sankara in both tone and substance, and he backed it with action. Within months, he ordered the departure of French troops and expelled their ambassador, unraveling decades of external control in swift succession. Predictably, international backlash followed. Western media labeled him authoritarian. Critics warned of growing ties with Russia. But for millions in Burkina Faso, Traoré wasn't steering the country into isolation. He was freeing it from decades of managed dependency. He often addressed the nation in military fatigues, standing not as a politician, but as a symbol of resistance against neo-colonialism. He called it a new war, one not fought with guns, but with sovereignty. The event on June 26th was the clearest declaration of this vision. The reception of the 8 ambassadors was meticulously planned. It wasn't just a show of diplomacy, it was a demonstration of Burkina Faso's redefined identity. On the world stage, from the red carpet to the military salute, Everything underscored one point: this nation was no longer a client state, but a sovereign player. Each country present served a purpose in Traoré's vision. India, for instance, signaled a move toward South-South cooperation, away from traditional aid models and toward mutual development. India's quiet but steady involvement in Burkina Faso through solar energy, agriculture, and digital support made it a natural ally for a leader who values self-reliance. The presence of Turkey added another dimension. Though a NATO member, Turkey has long charted its own path. For Burkina Faso, a security partnership with Ankara offered fresh alternatives to Western military entanglements. Cuba's inclusion harked back to a shared history of revolutionary resistance and solidarity with African liberation movements. Meanwhile, countries like Gabon, Equatorial Guinea, and Sierra Leone represented a regional alignment, neighbors, recognizing a new axis of leadership forming in the Sahel. Even Luxembourg's presence, a surprise to many, hinted at quiet diplomacy and new financial dialogues. And Bangladesh, a rising economy with a history of struggle and self-reliance, fit perfectly into Traoré's growing network of like-minded states. This wasn't a one-off event. It was a signal to the world. Burkina Faso is repositioning itself under Traoré's leadership. The country isn't waiting for permission to redefine its future. It's building a new circle of alliances, built on respect, shared struggle, and mutual benefit. As global dynamics shift, the ceremony in Ouagadougou will be remembered as more than a diplomatic exchange. It will be seen as a turning point, a moment when the echo of Sankara found a voice in Traoré, and when a continent long marginalized stood up, not with fanfare, but with resolve. Turkish-made drones have quietly reshaped how security is approached in many parts of Africa. Affordable, effective, and readily available, they provide an alternative to the expensive, conditional military aid often offered by Western nations. But it's not just defense hardware where Turkey has gained ground. Turkish companies are leaving their mark across the continent through construction, energy, and transport projects without the usual strings or lectures attached. This growing partnership challenges the long-held role of France as a regional security provider, and it's doing so with practical results. Then there was Cuba, a country whose very presence at the June 26th ceremony carried a rich symbolic weight. The historical ties between Cuba and Africa are rooted in shared anti-imperialist struggles, and the legacy of solidarity still runs deep. Burkina Faso's former leader, Thomas Sankara, had a close bond with Fidel Castro. So, when Cuba's ambassador stepped forward, it wasn't just about diplomacy, it was about ideology. It signaled that Captain Ibrahim Traoré wasn't simply aligning with states. He was aligning with values: resistance, independence, and self-reliance. The presence of Gabon and Equatorial Guinea added another layer. These are two energy-rich Central African nations, and their involvement reflects Traoré's deeper vision of African unity. It is a clear turn inward toward continental cooperation. For generations, African nations were conditioned to seek solutions from Europe. But now, the emphasis is shifting to collaboration between neighbors, countries with similar challenges and shared goals. Energy deals may come, but the bigger statement is about trust among African states. Sierra Leone's participation added a poignant note. Both Burkina Faso and Sierra Leone have endured civil unrest, and both know what rebuilding from devastation truly looks like. This wasn't the traditional donor-beneficiary dynamic. It was a bond between survivors, countries that understand the long road to peace and what it takes to walk it on their own terms. Then came Bangladesh, perhaps the most surprising but most strategic inclusion. At one point, Bangladesh was among the poorest nations on earth. But through internal innovation, grassroots empowerment, and relentless focus on education and industry, it transformed itself into one of the most promising economies in South Asia. For Burkina Faso, this is more than symbolic, it's a roadmap. By turning to Dhaka, Traoré is sidestepping traditional Western development models and instead looking to nations that have walked the same uphill path and succeeded. Even Luxembourg's appearance had its own subtle power. While it might not have colonial ties to Africa, it is a global financial hub. Traoré's invitation was not a contradiction, it was a calculated balance. He wasn't closing the door to Europe. He was opening a new one that doesn't require sacrificing sovereignty. His message was clear. Burkina Faso welcomes investment, but on its own terms, with its own priorities, and without compromising its independence. Each ambassador who stepped forward was part of a bigger narrative, one of transformation. The June 26th event was not simply a ceremonial exchange of credentials. It was the embodiment of a new direction. Every handshake told a story of redefining partnerships, asserting independence, and embracing a multipolar world. Traoré didn't isolate his nation that day. He repositioned it. In Western capitals, Paris, Brussels, and Washington, the reaction to this realignment was one of concern, even unease. Official statements framed Burkina Faso as withdrawing from traditional allies. But behind the scenes, there was an understanding that this wasn't just about one country. It was about momentum. First Mali, then Burkina Faso, and now Niger, all forming the Alliance of Sahel States, AES. This wasn't coincidence. It was coordination. And with that came pushback. Much of it started in the media. Western narratives quickly framed Traoré not as a reformer, but as a strong man. His new alliances were portrayed not as sovereign choices, but as dangerous flirtations with rival powers. The deeper idea that African nations could forge their own futures, free of external interference, was portrayed as naive or even reckless. But the media headlines are just one front. The more powerful response often comes through financial channels. Sanctions, frozen assets, withheld aid, and pressure on global financial institutions like the IMF and World Bank are the modern tools used to discipline governments that step out of line. The message is subtle but sharp: cooperate or face economic pain. This is why Traoré's internal reforms are just as crucial as his international alliances. Political freedom is hollow without economic independence, and the most direct move toward that goal has come through Burkina Faso's gold sector. For decades, foreign corporations have extracted massive wealth from Burkina Faso's soil while the nation itself remained impoverished. Traoré's government is now pushing for local refining, stronger state stakes in new mining projects, and a review of existing contracts. These steps don't just threaten profits, they threaten a system designed to keep Africa resource-rich and cash-poor. June 26th may have been symbolic, but the real battle is being fought underground where gold is mined and wealth is decided. The stronger Burkina Faso becomes in controlling its natural resources, the more nervous the old system gets. This isn't about democracy or human rights, this is about money and control. And when a leader begins to pull away from the financial levers of the old order, that's when the pressure intensifies. Traoré's vision, however, is not about isolation. It's about options. His outreach to nations like India and Bangladesh shows that development no longer needs to be dictated from Paris or Washington. Partnerships with Turkey and Cuba prove that defense and healthcare cooperation can come from beyond traditional power centers, and connections with African neighbors show that unity and shared strength are possible without intermediaries. The formation of the Sahel Alliance between Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger marks the beginning of a new regional bloc, one grounded in shared struggle and mutual determination. It's a shift that could inspire other nations and create a new blueprint for post-colonial independence. What we're witnessing is not simply the story of one country. It is the awakening of a continent. And yes, that awakening makes some uncomfortable, because for centuries, Africa's role was scripted by outsiders. Now, the actors have changed, and so has the script. The people of Burkina Faso, led by a young captain with the weight of history behind him, are choosing to tell their own story. The world may frame this as instability, but for millions watching across Africa and the global South, it is inspiration. It is proof that a new dawn is possible, one built not on foreign aid, but on dignity, unity, and determination. If you believe in a future where nations choose their own path, where partnerships are built on respect, and where Africa rises on its own terms, then you are part of this movement. To like, share, and subscribe for more stories that show the real face of Africa's transformation.